So, you've decided to come to Davinci Resolve, and whether it's from Adobe crashes or trying to uplevel from CapCut, I'm going to go through an easy to follow step-by-step process to get you started in editing your first video. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go to the Davinci Resolve website and download whichever version you want. Now the free version can do basically 90% of what the studio version can do, and honestly I used it for 2 years before I upgraded. But if you can afford it, the studio version is amazing. It's a one-off payment, so it's not like Adobe, and you get access to all the new features that they're putting in recently, and I've done a video on these new features as well, and they are honestly just mind-blowing. So it's worth it if you can afford it. If not, you can start for free, and this tutorial is only going to show you what you can do with the free version. So now you're in your Davinci Resolve database. So it will be empty at first and you're going to want to start your new project, but for me I recommend starting a folder structure, because if you have different clients and different people you're working for, it's going to make it a lot easier. So let's say for me, my first client will be Dr. Tim Pierce. I'll create a folder for Dr. Tim, come in here, new project, type in the date, but do it backwards so it gets organized, 2026, February the 5th, and then name the project whatever you want. So this would be Botox tutorial, and then create your project. Now you're going to have a few different tabs at the bottom. You've got Media, Cut, Edit, Fusion, Color, Fairlight, and Deliver. To be honest, I've been using Davinci Resolve for 6 years now, and I very rarely use the media and the cut page, so you can just jump straight into the edit page. And just so you know, edit is for editing, fusion is for sort of After Effects and more of the motion graphics or special effects that you're going to want to do. Color is for coloring, Fairlight is the audio tab, and then deliver is just for when you want to export your project. Okay, so we're straight into the edit page, but we're going to come down to the settings and just check the resolution is correct for what we want. Now I do shoot in 4K, but the timeline resolution always stays 1920 by 1080 when I first start editing, and that's because it's just a lot easier on your system to do it this way and change it to 4K at the end when you're finished, rather than try and edit in 4K. Timeline frame rate, I always shoot in 25 or 50, but I always keep my timelines at 25. And then the only other thing I would change is the proxy media format. I put to DNxHR LB. If you're on Mac, you'll probably use the ProRes LT. And then I change where the proxy media location goes to. So just choose somewhere where you have a lot of storage, probably an external hard drive, because it's proxy. It doesn't need to be on your SSD. So it's better to just keep it away where you can fill things up, and then save. Then I'm going to create a new bin to keep things organized and call it footage and audio. Now in my Windows Explorer, I have my footage and audio folder here. So I'm just going to drag my footage into the media pool. Sometimes you will get a pop-up that says, do you want to change your frame rate because it doesn't match the timeline frame rate that you've selected? And for me this happens when I film in 50, but I want my timeline rate at 25, so I just click don't change. But say you're working with an external client and they've given you some footage that's 30 FPS, then you'd click change to make sure everything matches with that. But you can always change it after you've dragged in your footage as well. Even if you come to settings now, I can still change it before I make the timeline. And if you click these little dots here, you should be able to see what frame rate your footage is filmed in, and this was filmed in 25, so I know that that matches the settings that I've already chosen. So here as well, if we double click on this, we'll see it in the source window, and then we have an extra window here which is where the timeline viewing will go. If you come over to here, you just have one viewing, so it can either be the source or it will be the timeline, but it won't be both. I'm just going to set it to just one view now, just to keep it easy. But I'm also going to turn off the live media preview, because what the live media preview does is when you're scrubbing through, it will just show you everything, but I don't want it to do that. I want to be more accurate and use this rather than this. So I just turn that off because it's just a bit of an annoyance for me. Okay, now we're going to start our main timeline. So come over to the master again, create a new bin and call it timelines. Again, to keep things neat, because once you start getting a lot of things in here, it's going to get really complicated. So timelines, right click, timelines, create new timeline. I'm going to call this Botox tutorial and just keep it on use project settings and create. Then we can go back to our footage and audio and drag our clip into the timeline. And here you can zoom out, you can zoom in, you can adjust the height of the video tracks and the height of the audio tracks. I don't really bother with the video tracks being high because I don't need to see that, but I do make the audio tracks bigger just so it's a lot easier to play with the sound levels. And this is where you can see if you want 2 media previews up here or if you just want 1. So as you can see, this is the source and this is the timeline. You can also make the timeline stretch across your screen if you click over here. And I do personally prefer it like that, but again, it's up to you. You can do the same with this side, so when you open up the inspector, you can also click this arrow and make it go all the way down, or let your timeline stretch across everything. You can also disable tracks while you're here, so you can hide certain tracks. mute your audio, solo play your audio. And before we get started with the editing, I'm going to show you a few keyboard shortcuts that I use that really speed up the process, and they're good to just get to know now rather than trying to use all these buttons every single time you want to do something. So if you come over to Davinci Resolve, keyboard customization, I have D as fast forward. So you'll search for fast forward in here, double click here and then press D. I have A for fast reverse. So you do the same, fast reverse, A, can reverse it. C is my razor. So what that will do is every time I press C, it will make a cut down the timeline along everything. And then X is my ripple delete. It will delete the clips and make sure that there's no gap. And I'll show you how that works in a second. But those are the main keyboard shortcuts that I use. I won't go into detail about my other shortcuts because you don't really need to know them just yet. The main reason I use them is so I can edit one-handed and drink my tea like a proper British lad. I also have the selection follows playhead on. So if you come into timeline, video and selection follows playhead, that means that whenever you're scrubbing along, it will select anything that's under your playhead. I would also come into the workspace, show panel in workspace, and I have the mixer on as well. So I can see the audio levels and the output audio levels. And now we're ready to start cutting. So the first thing I would do is, if I can see that my audio is way too quiet, like this obviously is, I would just drag it up, make sure that it never hits the top because that means that the audio is clipping. And now I have a good starting point for my audio levels. And then I would be going through it, making a cut with our new shortcut C, and then you can see that this is still highlighted after we've made a cut, and we don't want this, we want it to start when he's talking here, so we press X, and it ripple deleted all the way to the start of the timeline, and you did that with one hand in 2 seconds. Then we can zoom into the timeline with this wheel here, or you can press the Alt and scroll with your mouse. We can see that we want to make a cut a little bit here just so it starts when he's talking, so make another cut and X for the ripple delete, and then we'd be going through our timeline and cutting out all the bits that we don't need. And the way I do this is press space to play.
Why are patients more sensitive to injections on one side of their face?
Space to stop. C.
Common.
So I know you made a mistake there, so I'd go to this bit.
A common observation that I think...
There we go. Then drag the playhead to there. Press C. Ripple delete. And when you get really good at this, the reason for D and A is because you can probably watch a lot of things that you're editing in fast forward time. So if I press D twice, it will actually speed through it a lot faster, and I can find where I'm going to make my cuts, all with one hand, by using D forward, A to go back, C, left and right arrows when you need to go frame by frame, X, and so on. Now, you will get a lot faster at this as you learn and as you go along. When I started, I was a lot slower, but now I can edit a very long video very quickly with these shortcuts just by speeding through everything because it gets very obvious when you want to make cuts. The next thing we're going to want to do after we've cut down our footage is add our B-roll. So I'm going to go back to the master, a new bin, and add a B-roll folder. So there's different ways you're going to be doing this. So you might get a client that will supply you with all of the B-roll that you need, like I have here. In which case, I will go into my stock folder, highlight all my clips and drag them into my B-roll folder. Or you might have a client that doesn't know what they want and that you have to find things for. If that's the case, I recommend using something like Video Blocks or Envato Elements. They're probably the cheapest things for stock footage. There is Pexels as well, which has free videos that you can use, and Artlist, which has higher quality videos, but it's more expensive. So it depends what the budget is. It depends if the client's going to pay for it. So if you're doing it the stock footage way, it means you're going to go through your timeline, listen to what your speaker is saying, and then put the relevant stock footage over the top. And the way that I like to do that is after I've cut everything down is listen through everything, come over to the effects, titles, just drag a text file over a certain section. So let's say that here he said something about a dog. I would put a dog. And then over here, he said something about a cat. I would put a cat. And then later on, he said something about an elephant. I would put an elephant. Then I can just go to my stock footage website and go through my text and know exactly what B-roll I need. And as an example, I could just download it all in one go rather than watching, coming to download one, putting it in, watching, downloading another one, putting it in. This just makes it a lot simple. So you're doing one thing at a time rather than constantly swapping between programs. But like I said, for this one, we have been given a lot of B-roll that we can play around with. And you can, if you want, just drag your B-roll clips over the top. If I know here, for example, he talks about injecting the philtrum, I can double click this footage, make an in point with the eye, make an out point around here, because that is the clip that I want, and then just drag from the source preview over the top of my footage. Now, if you want to drag it without the audio because you know you don't need the audio, you can just hold Alt, I think it's Option on a Mac, and then click and drag from the source viewer again, and then there's no audio track. Or if you've dragged it in already, if you Alt click on just the track and not the video, then you can delete it from there. And then if you ever want to find it again, if you click on your video and you're like, oh no, I really need the audio for that bit, and you press F, it will open it back up in the source viewer, give you the in and out point for that clip that you've got, and you can just drag it back on with the audio. And with your footage selected, you can also drag while you're in the timeline if you want to shorten it, extend it, or whatever. And say you do have your audio, but you want to make an L or a J cut, so you want to change the in point of the video, but you want to keep the audio still playing, which is what most people do. You can Alt click on your video, and that way only the video is highlighted, and then just drag around there, so that the audio will be playing, but the video hasn't started yet. Just a quick tip, when you are doing B-roll, just don't have it on the same track as your footage, because it makes everything a lot neater when you have everything on separate tracks, and especially when you come to coloring later, because then you can hide tracks like this, and then only work on the track that you want to work on. Also, with the selection follows playhead, it will select anything that is at the top. But say I wanted to make sure that I only select the clips underneath, if you turn off this, then it will ignore that layer and just select the clips underneath. Now, another way I would do B-roll, rather than just trying to find everything in the source and going through clip by clip and in and out points all the time. Ugh, that's disgusting. There we go. I would come here so I can display stacked timelines and see what timelines I have. And then I would make a new timeline for underneath and come into timelines, create a new timeline and just call it all B-roll. And what I would do in this one is go through my B-roll. You can either find the in and out points up here and drag it in that way, or you can just drag all your B-roll footage in like this and go through your B-roll pretty much the same way we did when we were cutting the timeline, and just delete everything that you know you don't want to use. So I like that shot, but I don't like this, so I'll get rid of that. Don't need all this. And now I've got a timeline underneath of all my usable bits of B-roll that I know will go in, rather than having to go through the media pool every single time. And the way you drag that in is, I'll just make this smaller so I can see everything. So if you come over to here, click it, you can just drag the video size and the audio size down, and then move this down just so you can see more. And say here, I know I want a piece of B-roll where he's injecting the eye. Can then come down to this timeline again, scrub through it until I find the injecting the eye part, which is here. And then I can just drag this up over the top. It works the same way here again as well. If you alt click just on the video portion, then you can just drag the video portion over the top. And then I want to make a cut there, so I'll cut. And then always make sure when you use X to ripple delete, never do it when it's over certain tracks that you want to keep, because if you do it here, it's just deleted everything that was underneath it. So for this, we would use the backspace button, so it just deletes that, but doesn't ripple delete it. So make sure you know the difference between ripple delete and normal delete, and use them accordingly. And then once you're done, you can just click X off that because you've got all the B-roll that you need. And then we're going to drag out our audio again just so we can see it. And so we've already edited the speaker audio to a nice point because we dragged it up first. But if you did want to give it a little boost because you found out it was too quiet, or you wanted to bring it down, you can come over to your mixer here, boost it up a little bit, but that's too loud because it's always peaking in the red and it's coming up a bit too much. Or you can drag it down. And the default is set around 10 decibels, so if you want to drag it back to normal, just bring it back down to 10. The next thing we want to do is add our music and our sound effects. So come back over to Master, make a new bin for music, and make a new bin for sound effects if you are using them. Then we're going to come into our music folder. I've already got a music track downloaded from Artlist, which is great. But if you're looking for a cheaper alternative, Epidemic Sound is also really good as well. And I think there's free websites. I think it was called Ben Sound. There's the YouTube creator library as well where you can get free music from. So there is a bunch of options. You don't have to pay for this kind of stuff. But instead of dragging it to our media pool this time, because I'm lazy, as long as the bin that you want your footage or music to come into is highlighted, you can just drag it straight to the timeline and it will make sure it goes in that bin. Then we're going to adjust the heights again. I'm going to make a cut at the end of the audio because I don't want it to carry on, and then delete the rest of it. And I always like to add a fade, so if you drag this little white button creature thing here, you can start fading it out and you can see how, I just pointed to my screen, you can see how many seconds it is fading for. So 3 seconds is probably enough for this one, but that is way too loud for our timeline.
Projections on one side of their face.
So the speaker audio should always be around -5, I like. I mean, some people say -10, I prefer -5. Never go up to 0 because that's just going to blow out people's speakers. And the music, I like to drag it down usually to around -20. That's just the way I learned to do it. For some tracks, you want to drag it down a little bit lower. For others, you want to boost them up a bit.
It is about processing the things we don't
So we can't see it in the mixer, so we just drag the mixer out because our music is on track 3.
know, the sensory side or the creative side.
And then maybe just drag the music down a little bit more. You can either do it with this or you can do it with this.
About actioning things, so doing things.
And for me, that is perfect. Okay, so what about if you wanted a bit of the music to be louder? So let's just drag this out and put our B-roll here and drag it back. So here we have no one talking, so we could actually have the music come out a little bit louder. So if we zoom in, so if we press Alt and click just before the B-roll starts, then make another keyframe, Alt click just after it started, and then just before the end, we'll make another keyframe, and just before he starts speaking, another keyframe. And this way, we can drag this keyframe up to around -5 and drag this one up to around -5, and it will add a fade up and a fade out.
More about actioning things.
And this can also be useful if you have a music track where it starts off really quiet and gets really loud, because you'll want to bring the quiet bits up a little bit and bring the loud bits down. So you can't really see it on this one, but just for example, pretend this bit was loud after this. We'd make a keyframe here and just drag the quieter bits up so they match the louder bits a little bit more, and then we can always hear the music, because sometimes if you drag it down to -20, it might have already been on -20, so you want to give it a little bit of a boost. As well as fading out, you can also fade the music in at the start. We've got our B-roll, we've got our speaker audio, we've got our music set up, then we're going to want to add text onto our video. So if you come over to the effects, now, I've been doing this for about 10 years, and the majority of the time I still use the basic text title. Because if you think about it, watch Netflix, watch proper documentaries, they do not have all these motion graphics and these background reveals and these cool, funky little titles. They just use the most basic stuff because it looks better, so less is more most of the time. But if you do fancy something else, you can always come over to these titles and hover over it, and it will show you exactly how it looks. Because sometimes I do use the call out. There's certain lower thirds that might look better, but to be honest, no. No, just no. But you know, again, it's up to you. It's creativity. If you like that kind of stuff, then you go for it. But anyway, I would drag the text over. Let's say I wanted it to be at the start of my video. I would drag the text over the start of my video, put the out point so it stops at the end of this clip that we've made. And then we'll just call it something like how to inject Botox. You can change the font while you're over here as well. Play with the size. It's always nice to add a little bit of a drop shadow just so it stands out from the background of your footage. You can also add like a width and a height box around it, and these are really good for when you're doing Instagram style content because it looks native to the platform and people love that kind of stuff. I don't know why, I hate it, but it's what sells at the moment, so we do use this a lot when we're making ads. I'm just going to turn that off for now. And just to add a little bit more, I would still have him talking at the start, but I would alt click his video and just bring it in by about a second. I can see that's 1 second, and then add a fade in, and then on the text I would add a fade out. And I would probably drag it to just after the fade in as well.
Why are patients more sensitive to injections on one side?
It just gives your video a little bit more rather than a static text over the top. Okay, in the edit page, you also have a bunch of video transitions. And again, less is more. A lot of these make it look like it's Windows Movie Maker, but it is, again, ultimately up to you. If you want to use a diamond iris, you go ahead and use your diamond iris, but please don't. But one of the transitions that I do use a lot is the smooth cut. And this works great for before and afters because it makes a really nice transition, but you can also use it for when people are speaking. So here, those clips are almost the same, but you can see a little bit of a jump. And if I use the smooth cut in between them, just drag it down so it's not for as long. There we go. You can barely tell that there was even a cut made. It doesn't work for everything. If the speaker's moving too much, like over here, for example, it's just going to look weird and morph things around. So don't use it all the time. but it is a good one to get to know. The next page we have is the Fusion page. This is not for you, this is for later. It's worth using, it's scary at first, but if you watch a few good tutorials, you'll get the hang on doing some basic stuffs. I do have a basic motion graphics tutorial that you can watch if you want to get started, but for now, we're just going to head straight into the color page. And this might look confusing, but honestly, you can get by doing this quite simple. You don't have to have 1,000 node trees like you see on people's tutorials. I get by usually with 2 or 3, unless I'm doing something that's, a cinematic project. I hate that word. A cinematic project. I actually have to work on each clip meticulously. Then I might have up to 10 nodes. But for things like this, sat down interviews, or when I've filmed it nicely in camera, you just need 2 or 3 just to get it going. So I don't need my gallery open, so I'm going to close my gallery. And if you don't see everything that I see, so if you have the timeline here, that will bring up your timeline. The clips will bring up the clips. And then the nodes is over here for the node tree. So we're going to start by editing our A-roll. And this is one of the reasons why I like to have A-roll on one layer and B-roll on another layer, because now I can come into the timeline and hide the B-roll layer. That means all of these clips are my A-roll, and I can just highlight them all with Control A, right click, and add into a new group. I'm just going to call this A-roll. With any of these clips selected, come up here into Group Post Clip, and I can start color grading, and it will affect all of the clips in this group. And that means if I need to make a change later, or I've moved things onto different layers, if I've come back into this and done something else, that all of them will still be in the same group, so it's not going to be very finicky to try and find them and copy the grade over. So I'm just going to show you a simple grade to do first that will get you started. So I'm going to create 3 nodes. I'm going to press Alt-S, Alt-S. And then come to my first node, open up the scopes, and then I'm going to bring the scopes up so they're bigger. A couple of things I do here is first, come over to the 3 dots, display qualifier focus. That means wherever your mouse is, you'll be able to see where it is on all the scopes. I'm going to change my waveform to Y, not colorize it. And then the vector scope, I'll just show the skin tone indicator. And then I have the line where my skin tone should be, and we'll come to that in a moment. So with the first node highlighted, this is going to be my brightness and darkness node. So an easy thing to do is just skin highlight should usually be around 70%. Oh, also on my waveform scale style, I have it set at percentage. It's just easier for me than all the bigger numbers. I know that skin tone highlight should usually be around 70. So I aim for that. So around there, I can see where that is on the scope, and I would just drag like an S curve to bring that up, and just drag it down a little bit more because I noticed that's a bit above the 70 on some of those highlights. And now for the shadows, I can tell that just looks a bit less contrasty than I want. And also I've got some space at the bottom to push the shadows down a bit. Just make sure that it's not touching or clipping. I'm just going to drag it down to about there. So it's really subtle, but that's just added a little bit of contrast and mess with the brightness a little bit. Then I would come to the second node, and this one is going to be my color correction. So the way I do this with an A-roll is just come over to the power window, press the circle, get rid of the feather because we don't need that, and just make it small so that we see his forehead. Then we'd come here and highlight, so all we see is his forehead. I'm going to turn the graticule down so I can actually see where it is. And looking at this, he's very close to the skin tone line, but it could be a little bit more towards the green. So I just come to the offset and just drag it down a little bit so it matches. So you can see when I'm playing with the offset, it's moving that line around, which is changing the color correction. You can do it with temperature and tint, but I find it works better with the offset. So I'm just going to make that color match sit on the line, and then I don't want it to be so saturated, so I'll just bring it down to the green and the blue. And then when you turn off the highlight and turn off the power window, we've got a little bit more of a color correction, so his skin is more natural. Obviously the pink lighting is horrible for this. I wish we never used it, but we did, so we're stuck with it. And then I'll just come back and see if I need to make any more adjustments on. I think he looks a little bit too dark, so I just bring up the shadows again, bring up the highlights, and there we go, just a quick before and after. It's just added some color, some skin correction. And then the last one I would do is the third node is just a bit of stylization. So there are a few things you could do if you wanted to add a vignette. Come over to the power window, feather it a little bit, drag it out, and then I would invert it, come back here and just darken the edges a little bit. And then we've just got 3 nodes that just add a little bit more of a pop to our clip. And that's a very simple color correction to get you started. And then obviously you'd color the B-roll as well the same way. I've put the B-roll clips back on, and I'm going to disable the A-roll just so I can see my B-roll clips. Or you can do the same thing where you add it to the same group if you know that they're all shot this exact same, or you can just edit them one at a time. I don't really need to do much with this because I think it looks quite nice. And then if you've edited one and you've not put them in the same group, but you want to copy over the grade, click on the clip that you want to copy the grade onto, use the middle mouse button on the other node, on the other clip, and it will copy the grade over. And I can see that that grade is actually a little bit too bright for this one, but I've got a good base to work with, so I just bring down the highlights, and there we go. And then just make sure that your video 1 track is on towards the end and you've got things going. When you come back into it and you do click on different things, it will bring you back to the clip section. So you need to make sure that you go to the group post clip again if you want to get back to it. Okay, and now we have the Fairlight tab. So this is where the magic of audio happens. I'm not going to go into too much detail on it today, but there are a couple of things that I would always do on every video that you edit, because when you've balanced your audio, you might have 1 or 2 bits where it does clip a little bit. Sometimes people say one word very loudly and it's very annoying, or maybe the microphone isn't the best microphone and you want to add a little bit more of an equalizer onto it. So the 2 things that I would do is come over to the equalizer on the audio track for your speaker, double click it. And the male lav finisher I find is really good for most microphones. You might want to play around with it a little bit, test it out, see if it sounds nice. If not, just get rid of it, but it's a good starting point. And the second thing I would do is in the dynamics, I would double click that and I would add a compressor and I would bring it up to about -8, -9, -8, or just around there. And what that does is it takes all the audio after the -8 part and just adds a nice little fade kind of thing onto it, just so it doesn't peak and it just drags all those clips down. You can see if I change the ratio, it would drag it a lot quicker and flatter. And if I leave it up, then it will just do nothing. And then I would also add a limiter as well. Just drag that threshold up to -2, just to make sure, and then drag the attack down to 0.7, which is the shortest it can go. And that just means that everything that hits -2 is going to be stopped very quickly and not allowed to go any higher. It's just a nice bit of extra safety to have on your audio. And finally, we have the Deliver tab. So you can export this however you want. I do format MP4, codec H.264. That's just what I've always used and how I do it. But you'll notice here my timeline resolution is 1920 by 1080. So if we come back into the edit page, because we want to export this in 4K, and then come up here, we can select 4K here. Now our timeline is 4K and we've edited it, so we don't have to worry about it slowing down our computer. Come back to the Deliver and it says the timeline resolution is 4K. Then you just browse where you want to save it. So we have our exports folder here. So I click in the exports folder and it will give you the name of your timeline only for the first one, not for the rest. I don't know why. If you have multiple timelines, it doesn't do this. Then you just click save, add to render queue and render all. And there you go. That's some beginner tips on getting you started to making your first video. If you have any questions or want me to cover anything else for you beginners, then let me know in the comments and I will do my best to help.